Good morning, world. I'm Steve Rao, the host of Pod TV's World Edition, soon to be a part of the Roku TV network. And on this show, we talk about innovation, what's going on around the world, and continue to navigate through a long 2 years of a pandemic which does not seem to end. What impact will this have on our society, our economy, our world? All on the watch of President Joe Biden, the 46th President of the United States, and other leaders around the world. Today, we will close our monologue with my last take being dedicating and honoring Betty White, the legend who died at the age of 99. But today, my opening monologue is just to reminisce as we begin 2022. And by the way, we at the Pod TV family wish each and every one of you a happy new year and hope that sunnier days are ahead for all of us, wherever you are in the world. In 2021, January 20th, 2021, Joseph R. Biden was sworn in as the 46th President of the United States. He got to work quickly on a mass vaccination campaign. And if you remember, when he inherited the presidency from President Trump, only 14% of Americans were vaccinated. By the end of the spring, 60%, by May, 60% of American adults were vaccinated. And we had many vaccines out in the marketplace. Now, he actually said that June would be a summer of joy, a summer of freedom, a summer of hope for Americans. But that changed as we saw the Delta variant. Now, the Delta variant was scary. It caused a lot of sickness. It took a lot of lives. But the breakthrough infections were much lower among those who were vaccinated. Hence, the spread wasn't as much in highly vaccinated areas. So then it stabilized. We thought things were back on track. Then all of a sudden, we have Omicron. Now, Omicron is spreading rampant, infecting people every day. Hospitalization rates are surging. Now, both these variants, along with all the changes we've had with the stimulus funding, the CARES Act, the American Rescue Plan, all of these things, plus the infrastructure plan, have put what I call Americans in pandemic purgatory. And not just Americans, all of us around the world. The pandemic has made our children learn remotely. And now we're afraid they're going to have to go back to remote school. It's driven up blood pressure for many adult Americans. It's led to a drug overdose. And in many cases, gotten people away from staying active and healthy, leading to higher levels of obesity, which can drive up healthcare costs because of greater heart disease, cardiovascular disease, and all of the problems that stem from the fact that we're locked down at home. Now, we're getting out and doing these kinds of things, but I guess the bottom line is that it's been a long, long 2 years. Where are we headed? What can I do as I look in the crystal ball as a host of this show? What can we hope for? Well, there is some silver lining in the clouds. The silver lining is this, as I close out this monologue, that eventually so many people will get infected by this Omicron variant that they will develop what we call herd immunity in America and around the world. This is already happening in many parts of the world. As more and more people get immune, the pandemic could emerge from being a pandemic to an endemic, which is defined as a more normal disease, like the flu, which every year in our country, the United States of America, takes about 30,000 lives. There's also a lot of great treatments out there now. We're getting booster shots. Pfizer has more treatments coming out, a pill that you can actually take that reduces death and hospitalizations by 90% post-COVID treatments. All of these things are happening to help us get stronger in dealing with this pandemic. But perhaps the pandemic will soon be an endemic. Now, if it's an endemic, it will never go away. But we are all hoping that we can live our lives not always in fear, not always afraid that we're going to die, knowing that, yes, there's always a chance of being sick, but that sick shouldn't bind us down like chains, like we've been living the last 2 years. We need freedom from this pandemic. And let's hope that 2022 will be a year where we can celebrate that and finally have, hopefully, by the spring or summer, a summer of joy, a summer of freedom, a summer of going to the beach without a mask or going to a restaurant without a mask and saying that the COVID pandemic is over. My, oh my, I hope that is the case. Today, we have with us Mark Lee.
How are you
And
doing there and
good.
everything? We're
How are
gonna
you?
pop over there and help with
And
that.
uh,
So,
and Nick Paladiva might be coming
Nick
in,
might be
and
joining us very soon, and we'll see who else joins us and
hope it's
everything.
not a hope it's
You
not a bad
apparently were
omen.
not watching the news or the New Year's Eve celebration because I'm hoping that Nick's going to join and everything. Because Nick apparently told us that this was going to be a horrible year and the worst year of all time. As a matter of fact, I believe he predicted the end of the universe or something like that. He was definitely a doom and gloom New Year's Eve person and definitely did that on practice.
Just the end of the world, not the end of the universe. The universe will be here. We
Well,
just won't.
let me explain something. I mean, I really appreciate first of all before we start talking about sort of reminiscing on the COVID pandemic, but I thought it was a great New Year's party. I'm sorry that I could not come back. I ended up we got bored and we came back home and my wife got bored and instead of having a New Year's Eve, she had a New Year's Steve. It was just me and her hanging out watching TV. We're like, we're getting old and boring, you know. I mean,
Well, those
we
things
weren't,
happen and everything, but you missed a
and I was
great party.
enjoying the quality time with the wife. I wanted to come back in and join.
No,
Also, I think I broke my finger this morning at the gym. Hope that's not a bad omen. Someone dropped the weight on my finger, and that wasn't a good way
hopefully
to
that's
start
not a
the
bad
morning.
omen. It could be the omen that Nick was saying that it's the end of the world and all that. But it was a great party. Nick also bounced as well. I did pop back in, and the games were very fun. I played two of. I think they did 4 games. I played two of them. They were like trivia games, and I definitely did horrible in those trivia games. I think I finished dead last in both of them. But Brandon and his guests were having a good time, and we definitely enjoyed that. There was even a metaverse New Year's party that I was also part of that I had mentioned to you before the new year started, and that was fun. I was actually involved in that, and Russell may be joining us on our show this evening, the founder of Metabop and the person that put together this entire event, which was folks from all over the globe, and they were in the metaverse. They were having DJs do DJ sets. Some musicians that had done either pre-recorded. I think there might be one or two that did live, but definitely a lot of pre-recorded sets. And there were folks who were doing wearables and other things. So yeah, it was definitely a new type of New Year's Eve party, but it was definitely something that looked enjoyable. The folks enjoyed themselves. I've been in contact with a few of them since. I want to say that they said that they had 6,000 people come through that space and all of that. So that is not a bad number for a New Year's Eve party on the
Pretty good.
computer and all of that. So they actually felt that they did pretty well, particularly as it was the first ever one and things of that nature. Steve, I got a question for both you and Nick and everything, and that is, and we might talk about it on Media Monday as well, because the media has been in the news big time over the last few days and everything. And one of the things that was in, I heard you mention it, off the air and everything, and we'll get to that in a second, was Marjorie Green and Twitter.
Yeah,
But before
we're
we
gonna
get to
talk.
that, I was going to mention there was a young lady that was saying what she did for New Year's Eve. She was saying what she did for New Year's Eve, and she was talking about her New Year's Eve celebrations. And there's been a whole lot of back and forth on Twitter and even hashtag very Asian, because apparently she wrote that she was doing a celebration that was reflective of her culture. And apparently in certain Asian cultures, I believe she's Korean, just like there's very much a tradition in the South and definitely among the African American population to have black eyed peas and greens and pork, and I got two of those three because I was determined I was going to get it, even though I had to get it from DoorDash and everything. So I got two of those three. I don't think I got the pork, but I got the black eyed peas because we here at the network need luck. So I made sure I got the black eyed peas because that's what that's supposed to symbolize. It's good luck and everything. And the greens is supposed to celebrate, I think, symbolize money and things of that nature. But this young lady, and I forgot where she was at. I think she might have been in one of the urban areas, had said that she was having dumplings because apparently that's what they do in Korea. They have dumplings
Mm.
to celebrate the new year and all of that. And there was some pushback because the folks were saying, why do you have to say what you're doing to celebrate your culture on New Year's and all of that? And then there was a whole back and forth as to whether some of her other peers might not have been celebrating turkey and things along that line and everything. So as one of Indian descent, is there any Indian traditions that go with New Year's? And what is your thoughts about this Twitter pushback that she was getting because she just was basically saying what she did to celebrate her culture in New Year's Eve?
Well, first of all, we got Sasha Star with us, host of
Good morning.
Modern
Also
Mystery with
done.
Sasha and Jessica Star. Welcome to you. We're talking, Sasha, before we were talking before we you joined about reminiscing about the pandemic and the last 2 years, and when we might be heading towards an endemic. I'd like to hear what's going on with Canada. An endemic is when the disease is more normal than a pandemic.
He's using big
Hopefully,
words now. I don't know
yeah.
what to do with them.
I guess I'm becoming intellectual, but let me ask you a question before we get to Sasha Star. But you know, first of all, Indian culture is no different. I mean, typically you would have Indian food. This year, normally there is a big Indian kind of New Year's party I go to, and they were all canceled this year. So I missed the chicken tikkas and the samosas and the Indian appetizers, and just amazing. And then Bollywood music, dancing to the Indian style music, disco style. That's really what we do. And then you know that's it. And my legend is I wore it for our party, my red velvet jacket, which has become quite the item in Morrisville when I wear it in my hometown in the U.S. But and I
And
don't
just
know
to give and just to give it a
Twitter
little
that
bit of context, and Sasha may want to
Sasha, go ahead.
jump in on this and everything, but just to give a little bit more context, Michelle Lee, that's the young lady's name. She's a Korean American news anchor for KSDX in St. Louis, and she had mentioned, and I first heard about this on Twitter, eating dumpling soup doing a segment on New Year's Day food, and a viewer called in to criticize her, and apparently this has been lighting up the whole Twitter space and everything because he says it's subtle, but people do notice. Something small, but representation matters. We are not all eating cornbread, my friend, though it is delicious. And that's what she wrote yesterday and everything. So definitely, I think that she was just having a reflection on what she was going to eat as part of her New Year's Eve celebration. I don't know if there's specific things that y'all did in your part of Canada for New Year's Eve, even if it was virtual and all of that. But apparently, some folks got
Could you
very upset
imagine
with
if
her
you're
and
eating?
all of that, and they launched into her
Are you? You
attack
cannot
on
be
it.
serious. You're eating dumplings, and some viewer actually calls and criticizes. I think what you need to do is tell a
Yeah.
viewer to go get a life. I mean, to have nothing better to do, than watch somebody eat dumplings and then go crazy over it. I don't get
So
it.
real
But
quickly, so let's get back to the topic at hand today, and we're going to be
which
talking
is
a little
what
bit.
Marjorie Taylor Greene being
Yeah,
suspended
well,
from Twitter?
before we get to that, Sasha, what is your take about the Omicron variant? Do you believe what I was going in my paraphrasing and my monologue is where we've gone in 2 years from mass vaccination to Delta variant to Omicron variant, boosters, more vaccines, more vaccinated in the US, but still the only silver lining is that the Omicron could be the last push where we get to that herd immunity where more people have it and then it moves from being a pandemic to an endemic where we could live our lives not afraid that we're going to get sick but knowing that we could get sick and then we would just have normal treatments that we take. Is that where you think this thing is headed?
Translate: people will die, but we won't care. Go on, Sasha.
No,
What is
people
your
will
thought?
die. Like
No,
30,000 people
they
in
don't. They'll
America
be.
die of the flu.
Come on.
But,
They'll be
I
30,000
want
people
to hear
in
fine.
from
America.
Sasha.
They
Hold on
don't
a
care.
second. I want to hear from Sasha. But before we
Come
hear
on,
from Sasha,
Sasha.
we have a new listener because I just looked at the likes and everything. And apparently, somebody named Sherifet Raja, whose name I have not seen before and everything, is watching and just gave us a like. So, yeah, big shout out to Sherifet Raja, whoever they are and everything. It might be some of your new folks that you're recruiting as listeners, Nick. But Sasha, your thoughts.
Oh, that's surprising because normally you introduce me, but you keep talking for another 10 minutes and I forget even what you were asking.
No, we're not. We're going to quit doing
However,
that. We want to make
They
sure.
are
By the way, the
familiar.
protocol. No, Sasha, please, the floor is yours.
okay,
You're an equal
thank you.
panelist on the show.
So
We don't
now
intend to
I've
do.
been introduced twice by Mark, by Nick, and by you, Steve. Thank
Yeah.
you so much. First of all, when you made some observation about pandemic and endemic and what is what, it reminds me an old story about what's the difference between depression and recession. A
Yeah.
recession is when your neighbor is out of job, and depression is when you are out of job. So that's a major difference. And pandemic or endemic, okay, we'll see. So far, it's getting disproportionate wide circulation in all over the world, essentially. It's in Canada just as bad, and the US and all other countries. And the big question is the hope for the herd immunity. Does that generate any immunity at all? I've never heard yes or no or maybe answer at all. Everybody's talking about herd immunity, that we will all get sick and then we will all be immune. What makes you think that you will be immune by being
Yeah,
sick?
that's
Anybody?
true. I don't know what we
No
just
evidence
don't
one
know
way or the other.
when comes the point when it becomes more of a part of the normal community to accept that you have this disease, sort of like the flu. That's what's a lot of kinds confusing. It's a pandemic now, and lots of people, over 825,000 in America have died, 5.8 million in the world, right? So,
Mhm.
but yeah, you're right. Does sickness mean that you're immune? I don't know. I'm not an
Exactly.
epidemiologist.
So that invalidates all this talk about the herd immunity. That okay, it's okay not to be vaccinated and to get sick or so on, and then somehow everybody will get sick and everybody will be immune at the end of the day. And I just don't buy that story at all. You may get sick, get well in a few days. At least it's not lethal as other variants, and then in a 2 weeks' time, you'll get sick again. What may be the case is that your second sickness will not be as severe as the first one. So if the first one didn't kill you, then the second one is even less likely to kill you. Although all, all, very, all possibilities are there. So I think that you have to, in my opinion, try to prevent um, this variant, at least get yourself insulated. The best way is, what can you do? Stay home, number one, defense. Number two, if you have to go somewhere, wear a mask, keep the distance. And there is very little. We are back where we were 2 years ago,
Yeah.
except that this variant is not as
And I
lethal.
mean, and yeah, and let's go to the next topic before we get to some stuff around the world. But you know, it's not something we talk about enough. But all of us, we're living our lives so differently. We sometimes feel isolation. If the kids have to go back to remote school, are they going to be able to do with that? Blood pressure rising, people drinking and alcohol and drugs. Right. For me, I got to tell you personally, what I always looked forward to at the end of the year, at the beginning of the new year, was going out to my office, seeing all of my colleagues, talking in person about the movies I saw, whether I did it in the theater, whether I did it on Netflix, telling some jokes. Normally, the first day or so, it really wouldn't be at work. You'd be meeting people, getting energy. Now, there's some in person events tomorrow where I live, but I don't know if they're going to be canceled or not. But the thing is, I get tired of living like this, where I'm not able to go out of my house. I'm communicating with you all. Now, I find during the day, every day, not I love you guys, you're like my family, but my energy level goes up at this hour. When I'm seeing you on the screen and I'm speaking, my energy level goes up. And don't let it get to your head. After I do this show, I always have a better day because
Oh, so we're doing something good.
I see you, right?
Okay.
But if I had a day where I didn't see anyone but a computer screen, right? After a few hours, you can only do so many Zoom meetings, and you get really tired. You
It's
feel,
interesting.
I feel
Feel moldy.
claustrophobic sometimes.
It's
Oh, but
interesting you bring that.
I have a shout out for our friends in Lithuania, Mia Smith and Zaka Iqbal from Lithuania, who watches our show. So just let them know, say
Yeah,
hello.
we like to give shout out to
Okay.
people that are watching and
I don't know
everything.
why we're doing well in Lithuania.
Yeah,
Maybe we should all
who
move
knows?
there.
Lithuania is a great country, and definitely it's good to know that we're doing well there and everything. But it's interesting you bring that up, Steve, because I actually just had this conversation with a couple of friends, and one of the things that we were observing was that a lot of people are glad to widen their friend circle. I mean, I don't know if it had been for international broadcast and media that I would have met the illustrious chess champion and chess person, Sasha Starr. So glad to have him on my friend circle now and everything, and definitely have Nick in that friend circle, and that I've met some people from places as far away as India, Australia, New Zealand, and a number of other places. Now, there is a little bit of like you said earlier, fatigue. I call it maybe Zoom or meeting fatigue, where a lot of people are hoping that as we get further out of this, that we can actually meet these people in not just the computer screen, but actually meet them in real life. I know that even Shaquille has talked about wanting to come to from Australia to meet us all in person here in North Carolina. I know that, like I've mentioned before, I've got relatives in Canada, so I need to go visit Will and his family, whether that relationship is still going in whatever direction it's going. But I also want to, while I'm there, visit Sasha and maybe even have him whoop my backside in chess because I know I
Hey,
stand no chance, but I'll at least give it a shot and everything because I know who the better player is. But it would still be fun to sit down and at least maybe learn from somebody that is much more of a master than I am and all of that. So that's just one of my
and
immediate thoughts.
Sasha has a friend who does a shout out. I can't pronounce the name. Shakara, maybe you can help Steve.
Boston Bucks,
Yeah. So anyway, that's
Boston
a
Bucks.
shout out for him from Chess Nation.
And while we're
He's
giving out
fun.
shout outs, I know that Sasha
I
popped
I get all
also
my
into the party as well. So I was just wondering what Sasha did other than pop into Brandon's New Year's Eve celebration because I did see him pop in toward the tail end, but I was wondering what other things he did for his celebration because that was one of the other things that we talked about. So, Sasha, what did you do for New Year's Eve?
Oh, okay. Earlier, around like 6 o'clock, my daughter with her husband came to visit us, and so we spent about a couple of hours talking, dining, and sort of started to celebrate. But then around 8:30, they had to leave because they live in Collingwood, which is about an hour, 45 minutes drive from Toronto. So they left there and they came around 11:30, right in time for New Year's Eve celebration. And so we just relaxed, played some chess, and then around a quarter to 12 we watched CNN, this ball and all these beauties. And so we had champagne at exactly at midnight, and watched a little bit more TV, and then went to rest. That's
How,
how we
how
saw
is your
it.
wife doing, by the way? I know that she was having
how's Nava
some.
Star?
She's doing actually today. She's somewhat better.
Oh, good.
It's a long process, and you have to be, first of all, you have to be mentally very strong to go through all that. You have to really believe in yourself. You have to do exercise. You have to do this and so many things. But as long as you have mental power, she'll do it. I have no doubts about that.
Wow.
Last question for Sasha, at least for now, is when I mentioned those celebrations, are there celebrations in Russia in terms of food? Because I mentioned the lady that had the dumplings, and I think that they have different things that symbolize different things. Like I think one of them is supposed to be for prosperity, something else is supposed to be for wealth, and different other, well, prosperity and wealth are related, but they're supposed to be for different qualities, whether it's wealth, luck, or whatever. Are there any of those traditional foods to bring in the new year in the Slavic and Russian cultures?
Yeah, there are traditional. It's generally speaking, it's a potato salad and there are probably hundreds of recipes how it's all done. Now, the vodka is very essential, and actually, a lot of this so-called zakuski, which is appetizers, they don't make a lot of sense without vodka. To tell the truth, I would just throw it away in the garbage. But as long as you have a lot of vodka coming with that, and you have toasts every 5 to 10 minutes. So by the time there is a new year at 12, you already feel really happy, and you forget about all the pandemic and endemic and just everything, or even yeah, inflation and recession and depression. You forget about everything. You don't even know what it's all about. As long as you have enough supply of vodka and the right
There
food
you go.
goes with it.
I drank a little vodka watching Hunt for Red October. That was fun. I had to drink some Russian, but I couldn't find Beluga, so I drank Belvedere. I need to look for them. Hey, so I guess we're all feeling sort of the brunt of this pandemic, and hopefully it'll become an endemic soon. But 2022, like Sasha Starr said, doesn't seem like we're much farther along, sort of beginning the way we did last year. And as we deal with this week we'll also be talking about what's going on in the U.S. now that it's 2022 with our midterm elections, gearing up for the U.S. Senate and the congressional races. How is this going to fare out in our where we live in the United States and North Carolina? We're seeing a lot of issues with courts lawsuits, people not even knowing they filed for a seat. Is that seat going to be upheld? And the fact of the matter is, proportional democracy. One vote equals representation. If you have 50% of the votes, you're going to get 50% of the representation in Congress. It's not working that way. And we're going to discuss a little bit about why that is and what the courts are doing about it. But real quickly, let's shift to some international. So Sudan's prime minister, Abdallah, I think his name is, what is his last name? Hasbad? Uh, he resigned because of suppression of democracy. So he was the one that was ousted in the coup, tried to come back, and he was ousted. So this is really critically, this is crazy. So we're seeing, while we're dealing with all this disruption from our healthcare perspective, we're seeing disruption take place all over the world as we go into 2022. Ukraine, Russia, the rise of China, and then obviously the continued rise of China, right? And now Sudan. Any thoughts, guys, on what we're seeing here or anyone around the world?
I don't really see how Sudan affects situation in Ukrainian-Russian border, and or Taiwan and China. Yesterday, I saw actually a very interesting program by Farid Zakaria in the morning on CNN
Yes.
about
Yes.
China's rising power. Very impressive production. And knowing Farid Zakaria's basically very objective voice of journalism, it's very difficult to object to what he was showing and what he was saying about that.
What was he saying, Sasha?
Well, basically, he was saying that the China, and he shows all the history about Mao Zedong and Deng and the beginnings of Xi and how he came to power and how he changed in the last few years. And then he shows military exercises and military hardware available to Chinese and knowing their fighting qualities, even with bare hands. It makes really a scary impression. I would like to find out what's exactly military advantage of US compared to China is, where it is, and why we believe that America can dictate to China certain terms, whether it's a
Well, there's also on the internet China versus the U.S. and
Yeah, that's definitely.
if you look at it, it's pretty impressive what the U.S. has. I mean, China has some good stuff. We have nukes, and we have lots of them. It's just like Russia. We got nukes.
Sasha, I'm really glad you brought that up. I mean,
deliver
yeah,
systems.
Hold on a second.
We can blow up the world 5 times over.
No, we can blow up the world 5 times over. And I'm here that Steve brought up something. I want to back up on something that Sasha just said a minute ago and everything, because I heard that before and everything, where people are sometimes wondering about certain countries and where they are and everything and what their relevance is. Apparently, Sudan has a lot of relevance because apparently Sudan has more than 400 miles of coast, and it's definitely been used as thought of as a thing that need to be like a pawn, for lack of a better sense, of the world powers like the U.S., Russia, and China. And if you want to look at the entire continent of Africa, Sudan is actually considered, to be one of the top ones. It's actually the 3rd largest country on the continent. So I would think that they would have a lot of risks of
they got a lot of real
consequences in the world political landscape, because they're right after Algeria and the Democratic Republic of the Congo. And apparently they're the 15th largest country in the world. So I would think that they might have a lot of impact, more than we're giving them credit for.
Give us an example of how it could impact.
Well, I just gave you one. If you talk about a part of the country that is a coastal force, I mean, isn't that what the whole thing is around the old history of colonialism, was us having entry into like an entire area? And if you're talking about an entire area of the continent of Africa and their long coastline, I would think that would be an important part.
All that, how it impacts anybody. Let's see, Russia, Ukraine, or China and Taiwan.
Why does Russia want them? Why does Russia want them and be even concerned about them? Would be my counter argument. If
they
are
have
not concerned
a
at all.
coastline on the Red Sea.
So Sasha,
they could disrupt traffic.
Yeah, it could. Well, I think Africa, the continent of Africa, uh, just all of the African countries, it's a huge economic, potentially already is an economic powerhouse in terms of the markets in Africa. And so I think having solid democratic governments is important to continue to promote capitalism. And I think it would not really have a direct, um, you know, impact on Russia or Ukraine, but it's once again an example of disruption. What I call a democratic. Well, Fareed Zakaria, he calls it a recession in democracy, a democratic recession, where all of a sudden all of these free governments are toppling, and it just, it's not going to have an immediate impact, but I think it's
Well,
another example of
and Steve, along those same lines, guess what Sudan did last year that I don't even think the U.S. has done yet?
What's that?
what.
It cleared its arrears with the International Development Association, signaling its re-engagement with the World Bank Group. So they definitely have lowered the door to nearly $2 billion in new development financing. So they're going to be doing a whole lot of development in the Sudan as well, because apparently they've cleared a lot of their debt.
That's pretty impressive.
Bravo, bravo.
Bravo, bravo. But see, the real problem is Sudan relative to China and Russia is just not even a player compared to China. I mean, if you look at China, and here's the big problem: they have 1.6 billion people over there, and they're marching in unison, and they're building their economy up like crazy. And I think their GDP prior to the pandemic was going at 8% per year. Ours was like 3%. They haven't caught the United States, but in total purchasing power, they have. In other words, so you're looking at something that will become the world's largest economy, and they are actually heavily influencing Africa more than we are, because they're investing in it and they're playing government with them, where we're sitting over here doing whatever we're
They're
doing.
investing in them, and that's actually
We're
been one
sitting
of
over
the
here watching football and drinking vodka. So
that's been one of the conversations that's been going on
Yeah.
within the African American business community, is that there
Yeah.
needs to be more of a relationship between the African American business community and the African continent. And there's been entire efforts sometimes with countries within Africa like Ghana and Liberia and some of the other countries that are there,
I did the
and
census.
sometimes the entire continent.
We're not seeing that. That might be a good topic to bring in someone from Africa that's representing what these new markets are in terms of both Canadian businesses, U.S. businesses, in terms of exporting goods. I know, and where we live in North Carolina, I don't hear anything going on with commerce in North Carolina and Africa.
No,
we have an office in Japan, we have an office in Europe, we have an office in India.
Yeah,
right.
Many
Maybe a
years
small
ago,
place.
I wouldn't tell you that many years ago, I was in Africa, in the Republic of Guinea, with geologists, and we acquired mineral rights for development of diamonds. 1.7 million square kilometers, and we got the license or so on. We didn't really go much farther than that, because this 5-day trip make up my mind never again be in Africa with or without geologists. It's you're coming into a world which was in Europe maybe 1,000 years ago, maybe even more. There's no there's no culture, there's no hygiene, there's no electricity. I was in the Ministry of Natural Resources. They don't have electricity there. So if I wanted to copy a map, it was just impossible, simply because of lack of electricity. So it's so backward, and it's a former French colony. So it was not actually doing that badly, but nothing more horrible in my life I've ever seen. There was a very interesting point that the geologist had to fly to the actual place where we got the license. So they arranged that they have a helicopter. It's a Russian-produced helicopter, and it needs some spare parts. Some parts they have, so they will put it on. But the other parts, they ordered and they don't have yet. So therefore, they can fly to that place, but they will not be able to make it back. So he would have to look for alternative transportation, like by cars or something like that, which would take several days and would be dangerous. And anyway, we didn't go there. and I spared my geologist from the horrible experience, which could actually end his life just as well. So I decided against it. That's kind of a country in Africa. So right now, from my information, I think the African country's best bet is to stick with China, because except China, nobody wants really to go there and do anything because of the reasons that I've
That was your one experience. I know some other people that have traveled to Kenya and told me they had a beautiful experience, including our good friend Barbara A. Smith that does a show here on this
Well,
network, and said that she thoroughly
I think it,
enjoyed Kenya and the Kenyan experience that she had.
maybe
And there
maybe
are some
there's a
people,
difference between
yeah,
Kenya and Guinea. I
Guinea.
would
I know. I think it's
accept
where
that.
in Africa. Like if you're in
Right.
South
right?
Africa, it may
That
be a
was
whole different cat. If you're in South Africa or you're in Nigeria than if you're in um, certain other places. So it really depends where you're going. And there's some places I just wouldn't even go. I just go. It's for younger people that have more energy than I do. To if I have to basically depend, because you go from a first world environment to third world environment, across the border. That's like, and I think Americans, we're not used to that for sure, certain. What
Anyway,
we are used to are things that we'll take a little commercial break, something that goes on every Saturday here at the network. And that's the chess show that takes
Just
place.
show. Well,
Yeah,
real
amazing
every
quickly,
show.
Saturday.
I want to
Yeah.
just make a point on what Sasha brought up about Fareed Zakaria's program, China. To me, what was interesting, it was how brilliant it was for Fareed to bring up the point of how China's very actions today are actually trying to deal with not having cessation of different states. That these individual regions, when you talk about the Uyghurs, which are this Muslim group, Chinese American, Chinese, that are were responsible for some terrorist attacks and violence in China, that what Ping's trying to do is he wants to have one centralized national identity to eliminate people wanting to have their own identity. And so his fear might be what happened with the former Soviet Union, right? Where if you look at, and I forgot, Sasha, as I look back to the 90s, when I graduated from Emory in 92, how quickly these independent republics, these ethnic, run by certain ethnic groups, Lithuania, Ukraine, started seceding, right? Every day, and how quickly it crumbled, right? Could this be the very thing that this guy's trying to do, cracking down on capitalism, cracking down on the Jack Ma's of the world? Because once people start getting a freedom away from their government, will they necessarily need that government anymore? Is that's what's driving this policy for China? I never thought of that.
Hmm.
What are your
Yeah.
thoughts about that, Sasha?
that was very interesting enough. There were a lot of programs on Russian resources about what's happened exactly 30 years ago on December 25, 1991, when the Soviet Union ceased to exist and the red flag on the Kremlin started to go down. A few months before that, 5 or 6 months before that, um, the president of U.S. at the time, George Bush, elder, he was in Soviet Union, and he had a speech in Kiev, which is capital of Ukraine, and Ukraine was really the republic who was very vocal about leaving Soviet Union. And it's not like Baltic states with 1.5 million people in it. Ukraine was very clearly the second biggest republic as a population, as a production, industrial production, it was on a par with Russia. And when Ukraine started to really make it vocal that they want to leave Soviet Union, that was very important because Ukraine with Russia and Belarus, there were three Slavic founding members of Soviet Union back in 1922. So it was very, very serious situation. So the Bush elder, he was talking to Ukrainian parliament at the time, and he said that the most important thing is to keep Soviet Union intact. You can do certain reforms, you can change certain things here and there, but to keep Soviet Union intact. That's the most important thing. So when they did in Belarus, they had quasi secret. Also, Gorbachev knew about that meeting between heads of Russia, which was Yeltsin, Belarus, Mr. Shushkevich, and Ukraine with the first president Kravchuk. So on the 1st of December, it was 7th or 8th of December, or both actually. On the 1st of December, Ukraine voted 90%, 90% to be independent country, and Kravchuk was elected first president of Ukraine. So when this meeting, before the meeting started, Yeltsin said to Kravchuk that I have proposition from Mr. Gorbachev to you. If all countries will choose to stay within the Soviet Union and will write and sign declaration of doing so, would you sign as well? And Kravchuk replied, wait a sec, what you're proposing? That the people of Ukraine, at least 90%, elected to be independent country and choose me as a president, elected me as a president. So now, if I will sign that Ukraine is going to continue remain part of Soviet Union, what I have to do immediately to come back to Kiev, to tell my people that I betrayed you and resign from my presidency. Would you consider doing something like that? No, I'm not going to do it. I'm not going to sign anything. So that was actually the end of the Soviet Union. So
Mhm.
surprisingly, uh, Ukraine couldn't do it alone. Also, there was an option, okay, so Ukraine leaves, but the other republics would remain. But guess what? Neither Belarus, neither Russia, headed by Yeltsin at the time, they wanted to stay in the Soviet Union. Especially Yeltsin, for whom that was the only chance to get rid of Gorbachev. And actually, Kravchuk told him that, look, you know what's the difference between you and me? I will come back to independent country, and I'm a president of independent country. And you're
Yes.
going back, and you have to go to Mr. Gorbachev and report to him. So goodbye.
Yeah.
That was it.
And along those same lines, I think that might be where Steve was going and everything. We've been having some similar kind of talks for the last decade or so around whether Puerto Rico will join and become the 51st or 52nd state, or whether they'll stay an independent commonwealth, or what their future will be. And that might be still a course of conversation. I know that there's some people that are very much part of the independent movements that would like it to be an entirely separate entity from the U.S., just like there are people that would love D.C. to become the 51st state in the Union and all of that. So we do know that those conversations are also taking place even here in the United States. Hey, Nick, did you notice that we missed a major, or we might have missed, but I'm not going to let it go because actually it was mentioned to me earlier, news story of 2021
But
involving
Twitter
a
suspending what?
large part of the continent, and it's actually a continent that is tied to Steve, and to tie it into some of our other people that have been on the network during the time that we've been here for 2 years and everything. But apparently, there was a major, and I do mean major, apparently they were having sit-ins and everything else, farmer strike in India that just ended this weekend and all of that. So it had been going on for a while, and apparently it was a very effective farmer strike because apparently they got what they wanted out of the strike, and it ended on the second. So it actually ended just yesterday and all of that. So that strike has been going on in that very large continent and everything. So they are now clearing the protest, but apparently in the middle of a pandemic, they were having a sit down strike, and it was a very effective strike that had been going on for a long time frame and all of that because they were tired of believe this or not, because we sometimes have people that get frustrated with here in the United States. They were frustrated with some of the farmers' laws that existed in New
Really?
Delhi and other parts of India as well. So they have apparently announced the end of their protests after their demands were accepted by the government. So, had you heard anything about this, Steve? And what kind of reports were you getting from your constituents that might have Indian backgrounds and things of that nature? I actually was doing a pre-interview for a show that we'll be
I was
part of later on, and the gentleman was from India, and he had shared that with me as well.
we
So
are
I
planning
actually
to bring
didn't
this.
find this just on Yahoo. I found it because of somebody from India.
We're going to be bringing Mr. Chatterjee back at the end of the month to talk about India Republic Day, and we might ask him about the farmers. I don't know as much about this issue, but I do know that some of the policies of Prime Minister Modi have actually made it hard on the farmers. And Indian farmers have really been struggling, particularly the smaller farms in the rural areas. And I think that they're demanding specific reforms and policies. Now, I'm not prepared to talk about what those are today. I wasn't expecting this question, and I need to get better about being able to talk about anything in the world. But this is an issue that is going on in India. But the farmers in India have really, really struggled. And this is a real challenge because a growing population, high levels of poverty, and then you just can't produce enough food.
Hmm.
And this is a problem, and I'll have to go back and hopefully this week I'll have more of an answer for you on the Indian policies that are triggering this.
And people start starving, and that's not good.
Right.
But what about this Twitter suspension from Marjorie Taylor Greene? Okay, Twitter suspended Trump. Now they suspend Marjorie Taylor Greene. What did she do that was
Apparently,
so
there are five
obnoxious?
strikes, from what I understand. I did
Yeah,
read
but
the story as well. There are five
what's the
strikes,
story?
and you are given. I think in the first one they give you like a warning. I think they give you like a certain time frame suspension, and if you keep
Yeah.
saying the same things, then they get you and everything. And apparently, this all revolves, and we've been hit by it on the network around what they consider COVID misinformation. So she apparently said some things on her website that they deemed to not be following the government line, for lack of a better term,
Yeah.
and things of that nature. And they have a five strikes and you're out rule. So apparently she has said several things. Now, it is my understanding that, well, it's a double-edged sword, because it's my understanding that her official account, like her official account for her government account, is still alive and well and all that. But I did understand that if those information she put out was retweeted on that one, that could also get banned, because apparently she's got multiple accounts.
So
So this was like her personal
who
account.
makes this determination of what you can say and not say on media? Is it now Twitter? Is Twitter the Pravda of the United States of America? I mean,
It
I
is my
don't get it.
understanding from the folks that I've been
No.
talking to, and I
I
do
don't
agree
care
with them,
what
that
she
it
says.
is my understanding that it is that you are supposed to follow what the CDC says is right and wrong. So I guess
Okay.
technically you're
All
following
right.
Mr. Fauci
Yeah,
and that crowd.
this is where I have a serious problem with this rule. Even though I disagree with the anti-vaxxers, they have the right to speak, Mark. I mean,
Yes,
this is
I agree.
ridiculous. We're following the lines. We might as well be the Soviet Union. Let's go talk to Putin, have him come over here and run the United States.
Well,
Or even Xi
Nick,
Jinping.
but wait a
If
second.
you don't say what Twitter agrees to, then out you go. And we broadcast.
Many, Nick, in many countries, Germany comes first to mention is
Yeah.
that there are serious consequences for Holocaust deniers.
Yeah, right.
It probably infringes on the freedom of speech, because all they say is perhaps there was no Holocaust at all, or maybe there was Holocaust, but not 6 million, but only 2.5 million died, or maybe half million, or whatever it might be. So they have some laws, actually in Canada as well, that people cannot make bogus claims about Holocaust.
Mhm.
Again, in each particular case, some people may bring evidence that indeed there was no Holocaust, and therefore they're free to speak about that. But
Yeah.
you see, it's very difficult to live in a society where anybody can say there was no ancient Rome, there was never a Julius Caesar, it's all invention of
Right.
vaccinated people and unvaccinated people, in fact, believe that there was Julius Caesar, and so on. It's very difficult. There must be some agreement on certain facts and live by that, because otherwise it's very difficult to get anywhere. Because let's see if half people in the United States would believe. My best example is that the earth is flat, and
Sure.
they're all in agreement. Yes, the earth is indeed flat if you look and you
If you
see.
look around, it's
Yeah,
flat.
and
Right.
some other people are no, 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 it cannot be flat. It's round. It's like a
Sure.
ball. And what kind of agreement? We cannot live in the same country. We have to divide half people to stay where they believe that the earth is flat, and some other people have to just there has to be some kind of divider, because it's
Yeah.
very difficult
Okay.
to live together.
I know, I understand that, but the thing is, when you start limiting speech, what you're doing is you're limiting free, open debate, discourse, and analysis of alternating positions. Okay, so the thing is, really, who's making this determination, of course, is Twitter, and not by you as an individual or me as an individual. I mean, and I've listened to some of the Holocaust, the anti-Holocaust people. The thing is, and if you look at it, look at what Stalin did. He did his own Holocaust, but we don't put it in terms of a Holocaust. But
Oh,
he
it's well
was
known. It's well
pardon,
known. He killed
but he
way
killed
more
millions of
people
people. Yeah,
than Germany in
right.
all
Yeah,
First and Second War.
exactly. So the thing is, we kind of like give that a pass, and the thing is, we don't give the other pass when maybe they shouldn't get passes. But what I'm saying, when it comes to the United States, we've always had a tradition of having free and open discussions. And so
It's
the thing is,
gone.
I don't even know what Marjorie Taylor Greene said that would be so egregious
Yeah, I'm
that
not sure what she
Twitter
said. I'll have to look that up.
would strike her. But I do want to listen to the people that are anti-vaxxers. There's one I'm looking to right now. I totally disagree with them, but I want to hear what they have to say. They have certainly have the right to say it. You
Nick,
know.
there is
I
much
think as
more
long as we're not
serious
spreading
problem right now.
misinformation.
Yeah, but
Right, that's what
who's
it is.
making the determination of misinformation? Is it Twitter? Does Twitter have a medical degree? Do they have a medical staff
No, that's what you
that can
said. It's
make
not Twitter.
this?
Does she have a medical degree or science degree or
Yeah,
anything?
right. That's what I'm saying. In other words, the thing is, what is their background to make this
Yeah, but
determination?
it's but
You
when you
know,
look at
is
these,
it
when you
is
look,
it who's that guy that I met? Jack Dorsey? Is he making the
but
No,
there's
decision?
that's
no,
what he
What does
said.
he know
but
about
When
many of
I
these
was
same
under,
many
issues?
of these same people are using these platforms to spread absolute untruths, like the
Right.
election is
I'm
rigged or
I'm
whatever.
reading
Well,
I'm reading something right now by Michael Lewis on the pandemic, and the thing is, if you read that, then all of a sudden you see the CDC makes a lot of mistakes. But I mean, a lot of mistakes. And if you don't think they made a mistake, then look at what happened to the coronavirus. It was a big mistake that could be put on the shoulders of the CDC because everybody looks up to them to be the center of disease control, and they didn't control this disease. Okay, but if you speak on it, you say, look, I believe CDC is responsible for a lot of problems, then all of a sudden you're banned. Is that right? And the thing is, Michael Lewis's book be banned in the United States because he's doing his own research on the issue of how the CDC operates. See, this is where I disagree with Twitter. Who the heck are they to suspend Margie Taylor Greene? Did they have a board of 12 people that are medical doctors who say that this lady is out of control?
well,
Who wrote
apparently
the letter to
this is what they say that she did. Apparently, the latest ban came after she had tweeted on Saturday about what she said were extremely high amounts of COVID vaccine deaths in the U.S. I mean, there are extremely high amounts. I don't know where that would be
Yeah,
an issue and everything. And
that's what I'm
then
saying.
her fourth strike was when she had posted that the coronavirus vaccines were failing and called on regulators not to approve new shots. And of course, she's gone on an alternative platform, which actually, ironically, I use that platform
Yeah,
for that metaverse thing that we did and everything. Meaning the people that I helped organize that, and that's the source of Telegram, because Telegram is another source that is like Twitter, and that you can send the emails and other communications out and everything, because they're feeling that that's going to be a good alternative. So Telegram is another social media platform that's out there, and apparently her latest conversation is that she said on Telegram that social media platforms can't stop the truth from being spread far and wide, and she accused Twitter of aiding unidentified enemies in a communist revolution. That's what she said, a communist revolution.
Aiding enemies on a communist revolution. Okay, so it's obvious that she's batty, but see, that's another story, Mark. In other words, the thing is, just because you're batty doesn't mean that you can't speak your battiness. If we terminate all the batty speech in the United States, most 99% of the population would be saying a word. So this is a real serious
It is a
infringement
serious
on
issue. I know we'll talk
First
about it
Amendment
on Media
rights.
Monday, but
Yeah.
that's also people that were exercising their rights and talking about Twitter. I know I mentioned Twitter
Right.
earlier, but Twitter and Instagram also lit up yesterday afternoon because, and I don't even know the full story yet. I'm still trying to figure out what happened in the locker room, but a player in front of hundreds of thousands, if not of millions of fans and everything, basically walked off. He quit his
Well, that
job
was
right there in the middle of the field, and then he
Antonio
also
Brown.
posted on
Yeah.
Instagram his thoughts, and I think he put out something like Super Gremlin, whatever the heck that means, and
Right.
everything, even though I understand that's a rap song or some sort of musical song, so maybe he was trying to make a underground reference that he was putting out there. But I did see what he did just in after the fact, where he
Right.
literally walked off, and I was going like, what the heck? And he
But
was literally fired.
see, the thing is, Tom Brady and our friends at CBS said this is, the person has some mental issues. I mean, obviously, because that's not in the normal frame of what somebody would do. In other words, he has some issues he's got to work through. I did see where he threw his shirt off, threw all this stuff on. They walked out of the football field. Okay, he didn't do anything that was super damaging to anybody other than himself, Mark. But he may have some issues, let's put it that way, because that's not normal behavior. You don't throw your shirt off and throw all your gear off and storm out with peace symbols in the middle of a football game. It's just not normal behavior. But we don't recognize the mental issues that people have, and I think Tom Brady did the right thing, saying you got to have a little bit of compassion. The guy basically had a mental breakdown
Yeah, no doubt.
in the middle of a game, which could be a stressful event, because apparently he couldn't play for whatever reason. Who knows what the reason is? And when what happens, the media crucifies him, and so does the NFL. Rather than saying, okay, let's see if we can deal with this as a mental health issue and take care of it. And we don't do that. And by the way, Marjorie Taylor Greene, whatever the heck she is, was she a Congress lady or something?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. She's a mental case. All right. Now, if you think about it, just look at, like I said, we have 535 people that are in office, and senators and congressmen. They're not all going to be perfect, Mark. You're going to have a certain amount there of mental cases.
We'll come back
I
to
know
this.
we'll
talk back to this issue. It's time to close out the show. It's
Right.
been a wonderful first year show. We will talk about Twitter and what this means from a policy perspective. My closeout is about Betty White. My final take. At the age of 99, before her birthday on January 17th of this year, 2022, the legend Betty White left this world. Now, many of us remember as the Golden Girl Rose, and many of us who saw the reruns, even younger people, knew that this great American actress was known so much for her appearance on the Golden Girls. But the fact of the matter is, Betty White's work and legacy went far beyond what she did on just the screen recently, as one who proved that you can be older and move up in age, but still get big screen time. And she continued to do that throughout her career, even after the Golden Girls quit airing on TV. But she was also an advocate for LGBT community. She was an advocate early on, even before the Supreme Court ruling on equal marriage. She was the first female to actually produce her own show, her own national show called The Betty White Show, and showed a lot of courage when Arthur Clarke, a Black American man, was actually asked to perform as a dancer, and there was a lot of criticism about having a Black man on the show, and she said, live with it, and stood by her ground. She was a woman of tremendous empathy, compassion, and made America proud that we could produce such a wonderful actress, such a wonderful icon that was with us for so long. At the age of 99, she left this world so much of a better place. We honor her service in terms of the joy that she brought us as Americans and for those around the world. And she will always be known to all of us as our golden girl, because she probably brought out the best in us every day she was on that screen. So I close out in honor of the late Betty White, the, the woman who brought so much laughter to all of us, and she will forever be remembered here in America and around the world. On that note, we will be back tomorrow for another edition of World Edition as we continue our discussion of 2022. We just began this year. We're talking about redistricting, legislative seats, the off-year elections, and continuing to closely look at the Omicron variant and what impact it will have on major cities in the US and regions around the world. Thank you all. From our family to yours, we wish you all the best on a wonderful, great start to 2022. Thank you so much. This is Steve Rao. It's been an honor being with you today with my colleagues on World Edition on Pod TV.